Donald Trump's first week as U.S. president. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidu, and this is The Heat. Since being sworn in as U.S. President last Monday, Donald Trump has been busy transforming policy on several fronts. Over the last week, he has issued numerous executive orders. They include pardons for hundreds of those involved in the January 6, 2021 Capitol riots, and an order for the U.S. to again withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. He has engaged on the international stage too and addressed the World Economic Forum in Davos by video link on Thursday. A major focus now is what President Trump will do about perhaps the biggest issue of this election campaign: illegal immigration. Arrests and deportations are already underway. We begin with this report from CGTN's Toni Waterman in Texas.
We are really now starting to see President Trump's mass deportation promise in action. White House officials say that hundreds of undocumented migrants have been put on military flights out of the country. Those planes leaving from Texas and the very western part of the state, and also from Arizona, headed, according to officials, to Guatemala. Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, has posted some photos on social media showing individuals being escorted onto a military plane, which is a departure from civilian planes, which are normally used, and they are shackled, you can see in these photos, at their ankles and waists. Trump officials say 538 people were arrested on Thursday, some of them criminals, but that number, in terms of arrests, not that far off from the daily average under former President Joe Biden. Meanwhile, the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, saying a raid on a business in the city overnight was done without a warrant, and that U.S. citizens were detained alongside 3 undocumented migrants, including, he says, a person who had a military ID on them.
And if we allow people to identify us or put us in categories of criminal or any other thing just by the way we look, then we're going back to a time that was very dangerous in this country, specifically for people that looked like me.
ICE has said that this sometimes happens, that agents may encounter U.S. citizens while conducting their field work and ask for their IDs. But certainly these arrests and these deportations are putting immigrant communities further on edge, including here in Eagle Pass, especially after the Trump administration lifted this long-standing policy earlier in the week that arrests made near and around schools and churches were off limits. And speaking to a priest here in Eagle Pass, he is concerned that there could be these raids taking place inside his services. And also, speaking to other people, though, they think these deportations, these arrests are necessary because Eagle Pass was really ground zero during the surge of migrant crossings about a year and a half ago. This is the border with Mexico right there on the other side. And they say it's necessary to know who's coming across that border and make sure that criminals are kicked out of the country. Toni Waterman, CGTN, Eagle Pass, Texas.
Okay, to weigh in on all of this, joining me now is Eric Bolling. He is a New York Times best-selling author and host of the Bolling Show and podcast. Also with us is Joel Rubin. He is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary for House Affairs. With us too is Rena Shah. She is a political analyst and commentator. And also joining the discussion is Joseph Williams. He is a former senior editor for U.S. News and World Report. Welcome to all of you to the show. Eric Bolling, it's been quite a hectic week for the president. Hard to believe that he was only inaugurated a few days ago, but if we look at what he's been doing, dozens of executive orders addressing the World Economic Forum and traveling to North Carolina and California as well. Before we get into the specifics, how would you assess his first week? I mean, this has been a frenetic pace. Is he going to be able to keep up with this?
A dizzying pace, Arnold. Good to be with you. Some are saying he's done more in the first 100 hours of his presidency than most presidents will do in 100 days. I would say maybe even in 100 years. So he starts out with declaring DEI as DOA. He goes on to declaring there are 2 genders in America. The deportations have started, and they started day one. January 6ers get commuted their sentences. You know, Fauci and Pompeo get their security details pulled. He tells NATO, he bumped it up to 5%, or you're out, or we're out. Then he goes to the World Economic Forum, as you point out, on it, and says, we're not going to do this woke stuff anymore. Get used to it. So, and then, by the way, tells Greenland, Canada, and Panama, get ready, because here we come. America's coming after you. And if you want a scoreboard, before Joel or the other ones jump on me, you want a scoreboard, I'll give you two things. The biggest one being that the S&P has made an all-time record high yesterday on the fourth day of his presidency, because inflation is the big driver of markets. And when you drill, baby, drill, like Trump wants to, and then tells the Fed that he wants lower interest rates, that's very, very bullish for the markets and the economy in America. There's one A+ he gets. And the other one's probably a side note A+ for himself. CNN just announced several hundred layoffs, something like 7 or 8% of their workforce, and it likely is attributed to the new Donald Trump presidency. So the scoreboard is showing wins across the board for Trump.
Okay, Joel, here's your chance to jump on Eric. But seriously, look, Trump did promise a tough crackdown on illegal immigration and to get the southern border under control. As we've just seen and heard, deportations are already underway. You know, huge numbers of American people voted for him on this very issue. I mean, he's come under a lot of criticism for what's been happening as far as immigration is concerned. But does he have a mandate for this?
Well, Anand, it's great to be with you, and I'll agree with Eric. You know, look, if you wanted a dictator on day one, as Donald Trump said he would be, well, we got it. We have somebody who already issued an constitutional order trying to end birthright citizenship. Clearly, he's asked ICE, the folks who do the deportations, to conduct illegal raids that are against the Fourth Amendment, that are sweeping up Americans just because they happen to be people of color. And, you know, I think that this is a dynamic where, you know, he's making waves with his base and they're happy. But the American people broadly did not vote for an end to the American way of life. We don't wear on our sleeves our national identity. We don't have to carry walking papers, not required to prove that we're American citizens. And this is leaving a really bad taste. And I think, you know, look, Eric brought up the taking away of security details of Toni Fauci and Mike Pompeo, who was a loyal Secretary of State and on the campaign trail for him. It reeks of petulance and viciousness. And that's what's coming out after this week. Absolutely. He had a very effective week for his agenda, a lot of executive orders. I could go on and on, impounding money illegally against the law, against the Impoundment Control Act, you name it. But this is not what the American people voted for. We voted for lower prices. We'll see how that goes when tariffs start kicking in. And we also voted for an immigration policy that doesn't sweep up Americans and end birthright citizenship. And I think that is that's the takeaway from this week. A lot of petulance peppered in with some policies that he has been wanting to get at for a number of years, while he, of course, denies the 2020 election and springs in a jailbreak 1,500 criminals from the January 6th insurrection.
Right, Rena, Joel mentioned that big issue, birthright citizenship. He mentioned it twice. Trump wants to end that, but that order that he's issued has already been challenged in court, and in fact a judge has blocked it temporarily. I mean, how big a shift are we seeing in the way this country is going to be handling immigration?
We are about to see a seismic shift when it comes to immigration, because it is the #1 issue that Donald Trump campaigned on to get back into the White House. You know, look, there will be mixed minds and there will be differing opinions on how well this first week has gone for now the 47th president. I am a bit taken aback by the pace. I knew he was ready. I knew his people have been working and chomping at the bit for not just months on end, but years on end on tough issues, just like immigration, but also tackling inflation has been top of the chart, as has been handling geopolitical tensions. Those top three, that trio of issues, Trump knew he had to attack right within this first week. You know, it's been 5 business days since he's gone back in and sat behind the Oval Office desk, but it has felt like 50 days. And we know this White House what they feel they have to do is take swift action, because really on a strategic messaging front, it pushes back on that rhetoric that Democrats were pushing at the American people for a long time, that Joe Biden is just fine. And of course, we know that Trump kept calling him Sleepy Joe. So by looking very active, by taking swift action, he is trying to really put forth this image of strength. It's just no surprise. We know this about Trump. But regarding birthright citizenship, that is the one place with all the actions of this past few days, I found some of them practical. Look, I'm trying to look at this man beyond who he is. If he's unlikable, sure. Is he, I think, really vile in some moments? Yes. But is he taking action to better the lives of many Americans? I think in some places, yes. But the birthright citizenship action, which they knew is unconstitutional, and I'm talking about the Trump world, they knew was unconstitutional, and they were ready for the challenge. They were ready to attack it on a prospective basis, right? That is something that I think was so ill-advised, and he should not have done. That's just unfitting for this week. In fact, he kind of looks a little bit weaker for having taken that action. I'll leave you all with this, though, on this point, again, of birthright citizenship. There are many on Capitol Hill that I've spoken to on the Republican side that talk to me and understand that I'm a daughter of immigrants. I'm born and raised in Southern West Virginia, though my parents were not born in this country. And what they say to me is, it's being abused. And then they bring up scenarios of Chinese people coming from China to California and having children and leaving within 4 months. Now, those are just allegations, but I've literally had sitting lawmakers give me these kind of scenarios as reason for why birthright citizenship should be revoked.
Eric, this effort to end birthright citizenship, as Rena says, it's ill-advised, it looks petulant. Where's the president going to go with this? It's part of the Constitution.
Again, personally, look, so I agree with a lot of things that both Joel and Rena said. He came out of the box, guns blazing. He did everything he said he was going to. Sometimes on the campaign trail, people were like, oh my gosh, that's just rhetoric. He's never going to do some of those things. And he has, and he is. I'm not surprised that we see deportations immediately. And of course, there's going to be people, Americans, if you grab 500 people from a group and there are 2 American citizens mixed in, they're going to get swept up for a moment and then let go. I don't think birthright citizenship is going to go away. There'll be enough court challenges. There'll be enough fights. Trump likes to do these things because it does show his base that he is going to do everything he said. I'll tell you another one. And no one thought this was going to be possibly ever happening. He said he would end the Ukraine-Russia war. He said 24 hours. Now we're 5 days out, but Putin today says he's willing to sit down and talk about it. Zelensky says, yeah, let's have a conversation. Can you imagine if this one comes true when all of us said, oh, he's just saying that because he wants, it's rhetoric. Wow.
Okay,
well, Putin said that throughout Biden's presidency too.
Yeah. We'll have to see.
I didn't hear that once, Joel. Not once. Stop it.
He said it many times. It's just that he was what he was doing was saying, "Let's talk."
Joel, I'll get back to you on that, Joel.
Big concern.
And I want to talk about some other foreign policy issues as well. I'll get back to you on that, but I just want to go to Joseph Williams for his take on what's happening as far as immigration is concerned. Joseph, there are a lot of fear in immigrant communities. Many Latinos are concerned that they will be swept up, as we have seen. And we've seen families being broken up as well. How do you see this playing out?
It's kind of hard to see how it's playing out, other than the fact that there's going to be a machinery that's being built to make it more efficient to deport people from this country. Fear and loathing, that's the point. People have said many times that cruelty is the point. I think this is very much a case of that right now, because even though you're sweeping up 500 people, as Eric says, you might get 1 or 2 Americans. That doesn't make it right, and that denies certain people the right to due process under the law. And I think it's going to be a losing strategy in the long run. Now, in the short run, yes, it's what they said about Kamala Harris, the sugar high. It's getting people excited about Trump. But on the long run, I don't think it's going to be very good for business. A lot of businesses don't like this. A lot of small businesses don't like it. A lot of restaurants, a lot of farms, they're not really behind this. So we'll see how it plays out in the long run. But in the short term, he's going to do what he does.
Joseph, the undocumented migrants who are in the country, who work in those industries that you mentioned, things like the hospitality industry, agriculture, construction industry. They pay taxes. They contribute an enormous amount of money. I think it's calculated in billions of dollars to the American economy. At some point, this economy is going to feel the impact of that if this continues, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's my point in general, is that there are going to be issues if it continues at this pace. There are people who we pay to clean our yards, to pick up our garbage, to clean the office buildings at night. That's not going to happen with Americans. Americans are not going to take those jobs because the wages are too low. The protections just simply aren't there for workplace injuries. We see people getting injured at meatpacking plants all the time. That's why Americans don't want to take those jobs, which is in turn why corporations like Armour, corporations like Tyson Chicken, that's why they hire the illegal immigrants, the people who are here without papers, because they know they can pay them a low wage, they know they will be eager to do the work, and they know that they can get away with some things that Americans would not stand for.
Okay, Joel, I want to move on now to one of the other controversial actions the president has taken this week, and that is the pardons that he granted to well, it's about 1,500 of those convicted in the January 6th riots. I mean, some are concerned after these pardons were issued that it will embolden extremists in this country. But at the same time, if we look at what former President Biden did in the last few hours of his presidency, he granted a whole host of pardons to his family. So is it fair to just blame President Trump for using the pardon system in this way?
Well, first of all, I disagree with what President Biden did.
Yeah.
I thought it was unseemly and unnecessary as well, and I was disappointed. When it comes to the January 6th pardons, though, I have to say, you know, what you're pointing to is that they are excited about it, the people who were let out in what I'm calling a jailbreak. These are not people cowed by the rule of law or the courts and the systems in the United States that judge them guilty of insurrection, of violence against police officers. The leaders of the Proud Boys, for example, are basically saying, we want revenge. And they did not have to sign any pledges, any commitments to not engage in violence or political violence in the future. And it was a blanket pardon, which also contradicts what even J.D. Vance, the vice president, thought a day or two prior would not occur. So releasing violent criminals who attacked police officers on Capitol Hill really undermines not just the rule of law, but of course also the idea that somehow Donald Trump and the Republican Party stands for the police and the rule of law and being tough on crime. And it puts people at risk. And I don't want to sound dark or paranoid, but I will put out the point that this seems intentional. You know, Donald Trump, the president, does not seem to really worry about people being worried for their safety in the United States if they're not his direct political supporters. And that's a dark way to lead a country. That's not a unifying voice. That's not the way to ensure peace and security in our country. And I think that overall, you see a lot of Republicans too afraid on Capitol Hill to speak out against it because they don't want to get the Pompeo treatment. But Democrats aren't afraid to speak out about it. That's unfortunately, though, we don't have any power right now. And so this is Donald Trump's call. But I don't believe that it's the same, I have to close with that, as the Biden pardons. All that said, pardoning your family ahead of time, unseemly. It's not the same as releasing violent criminals who beat up cops.
Okay. Rena, President Trump is not losing an opportunity to slam the Biden administration's record. He did so again during that video address to the World Economic Forum. Let's listen to some of what he said there.
The inflation rate we are inheriting remains 50% higher than the historic target. It was the highest inflation probably in the history of our country. That's why from the moment I took office, I've taken rapid action to reverse each and every one of these radical left policies that created this calamity, in particular with immigration, crime, and inflation.
So, Rena, you know, some of what the president wants to do is going to take some time. But if we look at, you know, the first few days of his presidency, he appears focused, he appears confident, he appears to be a very different president from the one he was in 2017.
Sure, on, and that's all good and fine. But what I take issue with is the way in which he spoke right there. I think he would have been better served if he stopped talking about Biden's abysmal record and started talking more about the future, what he's going to do to clean up that abysmal record. If he, sometimes when he goes on like this, he tends to put out falsities, false information in the form of data, statements, what have you. And what it does is, unfortunately, puts him 2 steps back with people like me who, gave him a chance almost in this past transition. That maybe he's changed. Maybe in these twilight years, he wants to be somebody else and be really focused on writing that record from the first term, doing right by the American people, surrounding himself with a different set of people, taking the Republican Party back to a pro-business party that actually focused on small businesses as well. Look, we all know big money has a place in American politics. I'm part of an activist class that wants to change that. I talk to rural and urban Americans all the time that want to see the decision Citizen United overturned because they want a chance to serve and be in public service, but they don't want to have to raise billions of dollars from corporations. So what Trump is doing, I think, and what he did at the World Economic Forum there was perhaps showed that he hasn't changed as much because he's trying to, again, relitigate the past.
Right, let me get Eric's view on that.
So let's remind everyone that it was the World Economic Forum where a bunch of globalists get together, a bunch of uber rich billionaires who want to control literally the world. They're deciding our future on climate change, on carbon, on everything, on what we eat, social credit scores and whatnot. Trump has been against this. He's a populist. He's America First populist. So he went in there. And by the way, Rena, he didn't say anything that was data point that was wrong. He left Joe Biden with 1.4% inflation. Joe brought it up to 9%. That is likely the biggest rise in inflation. It hasn't come down. It's just come down at a slower pace of rising. And so he did say, and he said, wait, hold on, let me finish. What he said was, and we're going to fix this through drilling more energy, lowering the cost of energy, which is a huge, huge determinant of inflation. And the other one is lowering interest rates. He told us how he's going to fix it.
All right, Rena, very quick response. I want to move on.
Yeah, he's going to look, Eric, he's going to have to embark on taking some of the same inflationary policy Biden did. We survived a whole pandemic and the economy is very different now. All I'm trying to say here with Trump is that he needs to focus more on the future, and he could have done that by seating his Secretary of Labor, Congresswoman Lori Chavez DeRemer, who's an excellent, fine public servant, ahead of the billionaire class he had in the front row there at the inauguration. I believe in we the people, and that was a slap to the people. So talk about billionaires, he showed us that day. That was wrong, and he needs to understand that you don't see billionaires ahead of your own cabinet.
Okay, Joseph Williams, another controversial area in his order to end diversity, equality, and inclusion programs, DEI as it's known. He's ordered all federal employees hired under this program to be put on paid leave. What's going to happen with this? I mean, how is this being received in Washington, for instance?
Well, not very well. I mean, to be honest with you, there are a lot of people who are fearing for their jobs. There are a lot of people who believe that this was a backdoor way to try to get folks to leave. Therefore, you don't have to lay them off. And so they depart without any kind of a cushion. They depart with any kind of thing that would help them. But I also think that the more immediate challenge is the kind of hollowing out of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, in which the president says we're returning to a quote unquote merit-based hiring program, whatever that means. But I also think that the through line through all of this, through immigration, through these executive orders, is that all roads are leading to the Supreme Court. I think the president is playing a long game here. I think he's trying to cement a new America, but not through the executive actions, which he knows are going to get challenged, but through certain court rulings that will be the law of the land. He's got a friendly court on his side. Will they rule in every favor? No, they won't. Will every case reach the court? No, they won't. But certainly enough of the powerful cases will reach that they will have to make a decision. Is Donald Trump an imperial president, or does the rule of law succeed in America? And I think that's what we're staring down the road at in maybe 6 months or perhaps less.
Okay, and Joseph, very quickly, very briefly, if you can, we're running out of time, but what kind of president do you think he's going to be for the economy? I mean, he's promising tax cuts, he's promising to drive this big economy, but at the same time, he's threatening countries, even neighbors like Canada and Mexico, with tariffs.
Well, we've seen this movie before. I think it's going to be chaos. The shock and awe is not a good thing, to be honest with you. We're going to see chaos. We're going to see prices still hovering high. I mean, what happened to the day one reducing inflation? We haven't seen that yet. But I think a lot of these issues are being put on the back burner as opposed to these social issues, which are brought to the forefront because a president cannot control prices. Corporations do that. Stock market does that, and I think a lot of that's beyond his control.
Okay, Joel, let's talk about foreign policy. You know, Eric mentioned the Ukraine crisis a moment ago. The president has had some success in Gaza. I mean, for getting that ceasefire deal done there, and we've seen Palestinian prisoners and Israeli hostages being released. He's promising to get something done in Ukraine as well. He says he wants peace. Can he do it?
Well, look, I think it was very good that President Trump had his deputy, Steve Witkoff, his negotiator, aligned with the Biden administration's plan for the ceasefire. That was low-hanging fruit, and that's going to continue. But now let's see what happens. We're already hearing rumblings of the ceasefire in Lebanon teetering. Will President Trump take control and get engaged, or will he let it teeter? But it is fascinating, and I have to say there's an interesting dynamic taking place inside the administration of more foreign policy types who believe in restraint versus those who are much more aggressive in the use of military power, in particular related to Iran. And so there's a bit of a debate happening. And, you know, I have to say this is a moment for President Trump to lead if he wants to do it, because as commander-in-chief, he has significant authority. I just don't know how much he wants to really get involved in the details of foreign policy. And if you don't get involved in the details, while of course we have a lot of problems, and we did under the Biden administration, if you don't get involved in the details, it certainly can get worse. And I just worry that he's not going to really pay attention to that, just like we saw when he went to North Korea, which I publicly supported. Then he met with Kim, but then there was no follow-up, no detailed negotiation, and no agreement with North Korea, just to visit a photo op, and that was it. And I hope he gets more detail-oriented. He has a good Secretary of State, but he really does need to lean in if he wants to see progress of foreign policy.
I want to get to Eric very quickly. I've only got 20 seconds. Eric, what role do you see for Vice President J.D. Vance? We haven't heard much from him.
No, and he's very smart. If you look at what's going on with Elon Musk, who's had a big role, he's up front and center everywhere, and now there's a bit of tension between them. You don't upstage Donald Trump, so I think J.D. Vance is playing this very wisely. And I would just tell you, Joel, Trump loves foreign policy. He loves that.
We are going to have to leave it there. We'll continue this discussion in another show for sure, but we're going to have to leave it there. We've run out of time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. I'm Arnold Naidu in Washington, D.C.